Hello, everyone. Have you ever felt your heart stop, caught in a moment when the person you love most turns away without a word of explanation? In today's story, Eleanor, a 67-year-old mother from Ohio, stands in her living room, the glow of Christmas lights dancing on the emerald dress she picked for her daughter's wedding, only to hear a chilling phone call. "Mom, I think it's better if you don't come." No explanation, no chance to ask why, just silence that cuts deep into her soul. From a mother who poured her life into her daughter, Eleanor becomes a stranger on her daughter's biggest day. How does she navigate that pain and can love mend wounds that seem impossible to heal? Join us for this heartfelt journey where motherhood, forgiveness, and rediscovery intertwine under the gentle glow of a Christmas season. Please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. And if you love stories that touch the heart like this one, don't forget to subscribe for more. I stood in my living room, the soft hum of Bing Crosby's White Christmas drifting from the radio, the Christmas tree lights casting a warm, flickering glow across the emerald dress I'd bought for my daughter Margaret's wedding. The dress was elegant, but understated, chosen to honor her day without stealing the spotlight. I'd imagined the moment 1,000 times. Margaret turning to me, her face lit with that radiant smile she'd had since childhood. Both of us tearing up as I fastened a family heirloom necklace around her neck. A delicate gold chain with a heart-shaped pendant engraved with, "Forever, your mom." I'd hold her hands and whisper, "You'll always be my little girl." But none of that happened. A week before the wedding, my phone rang as I was arranging poinsettias on the mantel. Margaret's name flashed on the screen, and I answered with a smile, expecting to hear about seating charts or rehearsal plans. Instead, her voice was cold, clipped like a stranger's. "Mom, I think it's better if you don't come." The words hit like a gust of Ohio winter wind, sharp and disorienting. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's just better this way," she said. "I'll explain later." She didn't. The call ended, leaving a silence that filled my little house in suburban Parma, Ohio, where I'd lived for 4 decades. The quiet was suffocating, broken only by the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I stood frozen, the phone still in my hand, staring at the Christmas tree I'd put up early because Margaret always loved the season. The morning of the wedding, I couldn't move. I knew the ceremony had started at St. Mary's Church, 20 miles away, where I'd once watched Margaret sing in the children's choir. I brewed a pot of coffee, the aroma filling the kitchen, but I couldn't drink it. I wrapped the necklace and a letter I'd written for her in a lavender box, tying it with a cream ribbon, but I didn't send it. What was the point? The silence became a presence, heavy and unyielding, like frost settling on the windows. I didn't cry, not then. I sat in my armchair, upholstered in the same floral fabric I'd chosen when Margaret was a toddler, and gripped the edge of the coffee table as if it could anchor me. I told myself she'd call, that this was a misunderstanding, that my daughter, the girl I'd raised through every storm, hadn't meant to erase me. But the phone stayed silent, and the quiet grew louder, like the distant toll of church bells on a snowy Sunday. The next morning, a knock at the door jolted me. I was still in the emerald dress, now wrinkled and clinging to me like a memory I couldn't shake. I shuffled to the door, expecting Mrs. Callahan from next door with her usual casserole or FedEx delivery. Instead, it was Daniel, Margaret's new husband, standing on my porch in his wedding suit. His tie was gone, his collar unbuttoned, and his eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. He looked like a man carrying a weight he hadn't expected. "Eleanor," he said, his voice soft but urgent. "Can we talk?" Before I dive into what Daniel said, let me take you back to the years before this heartbreak, before the silence, before the wedding I was barred from, back to a time when love was the rhythm of my life, so deep and steady, I thought it could never falter. Margaret was my only child, born during a fierce Cleveland blizzard in February 1978, after 16 grueling hours of labor and 7 years of fertility treatments that tested my faith. When the nurse placed her in my arms, her tiny fingers curled around mine, and I felt a purpose I'd never known. Her father, Frank, walked out before she was a year old, leaving a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I'm not built for this." I never spoke ill of him, though the betrayal cut deep. I wanted Margaret to grow up believing in love, in loyalty, in the kind of family I dreamed of giving her. I raised her alone in our modest Parma bungalow, working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. By day, I was a librarian at the Cuyahoga County Library, shelving books and helping kids find stories to love. By night, I waited tables at Dino's Diner, serving meatloaf and coffee to truckers and late-shift workers. Every penny went to Margaret, to her ballet lessons, her school supplies, her birthday parties with snowflake-shaped cakes, because she was my winter miracle. I was there for everything. Her first wobbly pirouette at the community center recital, her science fair project on constellations that won 3rd place, her high school graduation where she tripped on her gown and laughed it off. We had traditions that stitched our lives together. Saturday nights, we'd curl up on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, watching It's a Wonderful Life or Meet Me in St. Louis, quoting Jimmy Stewart's lines until we dissolved into giggles. Every December, we'd decorate the Christmas tree, singing along to Bing Crosby's holiday albums, and Margaret would insist on placing the star on top, even when she needed a stepladder. Margaret was a bright, joyful child with her father's deep brown eyes but my crooked smile. She told me everything: her first crush on a boy named Tommy in 6th grade, her fear of failing her algebra final, her dreams of becoming a lawyer. When she was 16, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows, she'd still slip into my bed, clutching her old stuffed rabbit, whispering, "Just till the storm passes, Mom." We were a team, unbreakable, just the 2 of us against the world. When Margaret was 25, fresh out of law school, she brought Daniel home to meet me. He was a young attorney, reserved but kind, with a quiet strength that reminded me of the men in old black and white films. His eyes followed Margaret like he was memorizing her every gesture, and I liked him instantly, not just because he treated her well, but because he listened when she spoke, nodding thoughtfully as she rambled about case law or her love for Jane Austen novels. Over dinner, my homemade lasagna, Margaret's favorite, he asked about my library work, and I could tell he wasn't just being polite. He cared. When they got engaged 2 years later, I cried, not from sadness, but from joy. I pictured us planning the wedding together, visiting dress shops, choosing hymns for the church, laughing over centerpieces. I started a notebook, jotting down ideas: white roses, maybe a string quartet, a mother-daughter dance to Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. I didn't want to be overbearing, just helpful. I bought the necklace, a delicate gold chain with a heart-shaped pendant crafted from my mother's wedding ring, engraved with "Forever Your Mom." I planned to give it to Margaret on her wedding morning, a symbol of the bond we'd built through every challenge. One Sunday afternoon, Margaret came over, her arms full of bridal magazines. We sat at the kitchen table, sipping peppermint tea, flipping through pages of gowns and bouquets. She circled a picture of white roses and orchids, grinning. "These are perfect, Mom!" When I suggested a mother-daughter dance, she laughed, her eyes sparkling. "I'd step on your toes, but okay, let's do it." We hugged, and I held that moment tight, not knowing it would be the last time we felt so close. The change came gradually, like the first snowflakes of an Ohio winter, soft but persistent. Margaret's calls became less frequent, her voice distracted when we did talk. Our weekly coffee dates at the corner cafe, where we'd split a cinnamon roll and catch up, stopped without explanation. Her texts grew short. Busy? Later? Or nothing at all. I chalked it up to wedding stress. Planning a marriage, balancing a new job at a law firm, adjusting to life with Daniel, it was a lot. I didn't want to push, so I gave her space, believing she'd come back when the chaos settled. But the distance grew. I'd text her about small things, a new book I was reading, a funny story from the library, and get one-word replies or silence. I sent her a photo of the church hall at St. Mary's, decorated for a friend's anniversary, suggesting it as a reception venue. She responded, "We're looking elsewhere." No details, no invitation to join the search. I tried not to take it personally, but the ache in my chest deepened. One Sunday morning in early fall, Margaret invited me to brunch with Daniel's parents, George and Evelyn, at a sleek restaurant in downtown Cleveland. I dressed carefully in a navy cardigan and pearl earrings, eager to reconnect with my daughter and make a good impression. The restaurant was all glass and polished wood, with waiters gliding between tables. George and Evelyn were already seated, both impeccably dressed. Evelyn in a tailored blazer, George in a suit that screamed old money. Margaret and Daniel arrived last, and when I stood to hug her, she gave me a stiff nod. "Mom's here," she said, her tone flat, like I was a distant relative she hadn't seen in years. We sat at a round table by a window overlooking Lake Erie. I tried to keep the conversation light, asking about their wedding plans. "Have you picked a florist yet?" I asked, pulling up a photo on my phone of a local shop's rose arrangements. "My friend's daughter started a business, and her work is stunning." Margaret cut me off before I finished. "We've got it handled," she said, her voice sharp enough to make the table fall silent. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, sipping her mimosa. George cleared his throat. Daniel stared at his eggs Benedict, his fork frozen midair. I forced a smile, my cheeks burning. "Of course, just thought I'd share." I tucked my phone away, the photo feeling foolish now. The rest of the brunch was a blur. Evelyn dominated the conversation, talking about their country club and the proper way to host a wedding. Margaret nodded along, laughing at Evelyn's jokes, while I sat quietly, picking at my salad. When I mentioned I'd found my mother's wedding veil in the attic, hoping Margaret might want to use it, she brushed it off. "I'm going modern," she said, not meeting my eyes. Driving home, I replayed that moment, her sharp tone, the dismissal, the way she seemed embarrassed by me. It wasn't just the words, it was the speed with which she shut me down, like my presence was an inconvenience. I told myself it was stress, or maybe she was trying to impress Daniel's parents, who clearly saw me as a working-class widow from Parma, not their equal. But the sting lingered, a crack in the foundation we'd built over decades. Over the next few months, Margaret withdrew further. She stopped sharing wedding updates. I learned about her dress fitting from a cousin's Facebook post, a photo of Margaret in a lace gown, smiling with Evelyn at her side. When I commented, "You look beautiful," she didn't reply. I offered to help address invitations, thinking it could be a way to reconnect. "Already done," she texted. I suggested hosting a small gathering for her college friends at my house. "It's not the vibe we're going for," she said, her words polite but final. I began to question everything. Had I been too involved? Too emotional? Had I misread our closeness all these years? I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, searching for the moment I'd pushed her away. But all I found was love. Every sacrifice, every late night talk, every Christmas morning we'd spent unwrapping gifts in matching flannel pajamas. The more I questioned, the more I doubted myself, my instincts, my worth as a mother. The deepest wound came on a chilly Thursday evening in November as I was sipping tea and sorting library books at the kitchen table. My phone pinged with a notification from a group chat called Maggie's Bridal Crew. I didn't recognize the number that added me, but my heart leapt, thinking Margaret was finally including me. I opened the chat, expecting photos of centerpieces or dress fittings. Instead, I found a barrage of messages that tore through me like shrapnel. Maggie says her mom will lose it if she's not front and center at the vows. Total overbearing mom energy. God, if she wears something flashy, I'll die. Someone keep her in check. Is she even coming? Maggie doesn't mention her anymore. My hands trembled as I scrolled. These were Margaret's friends, cousins, people I'd met maybe once at a barbecue or a graduation party, talking about me like I was a caricature, a problem to be managed. Then I saw her reply, time-stamped just minutes earlier. Mom means well, but she's too much. Everything turns into a guilt trip. I'm just done dealing with it. I stopped breathing. I read her words again, then again, hoping they'd morph into something else. But they were hers, unmistakable, typed with the same decisiveness she'd used to argue cases in mock trials at law school. My daughter, the girl I'd rocked through fevers, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose dreams I'd cheered for, had reduced me to a punchline in a room full of strangers. I didn't cry. I didn't type a response. I sat there, the tea growing cold, the Christmas lights blinking mockingly in the corner. The pain wasn't anger. It was hollowness, a void where our bond had been. I quietly left the group chat, turned off my phone, and stared into the dark. The house felt like a museum, preserving a life that no longer existed. A week later, as I was folding laundry, another text from Margaret arrived. Just confirming you don't need a seat at the wedding, right? No mention of the chat, no apology, just a cold logistical check. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to ask why, to demand an explanation, to beg her to see me. But I was too tired, too broken. I typed, "Yes. Wishing you a beautiful day," and hit send. That was the moment I accepted it. My daughter didn't want me at her wedding, not emotionally, not respectfully, not even physically. The wedding day dawned crisp and clear, the Ohio sky a brilliant blue that felt too cheerful for the weight in my chest. I woke at 5 a.m., no alarm needed, my body attuned to the significance of the day. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the furnace kicking on. I put on the emerald dress and stood before the full-length mirror in my bedroom. the one Margaret used to twirl in front of as a child, pretending to be a princess. The woman staring back wasn't the mother of the bride. She was Eleanor Marie Thompson, 67, with graying hair and wrinkles that mapped a life of love and loss. I didn't leave the house. I stood in the living room, the Christmas tree, erected early because Margaret always insisted on starting the season in November, casting a soft glow on the dress. I imagined her at St. Mary's, walking down the aisle in her lace gown, Daniel waiting at the altar, the organ playing Canon in D. I pictured the pews filled with her friends, Daniel's family, people who'd never know the sacrifices I'd made to give her this life. I wondered if she thought of me, even for a fleeting moment, or if I'd been erased entirely. By noon, I couldn't bear the dress anymore. It felt like a costume, a lie. I took it off, folded it carefully, and placed it in the back of my closet, next to boxes of Margaret's old report cards and dance costumes. I changed into flannel pajamas, wrapped myself in a quilt my mother had made, and sat in my armchair, watching snowflakes drift past the window. There was no dramatic breakdown, no cinematic moment of clarity. Just a slow, steady grief, like the snow piling up outside. I didn't call anyone. My friends from the library, my sister Joan in Toledo, they'd ask about the wedding, and I couldn't face their pity. I didn't want to hear, "That's just how daughters are," or "She'll come around." This wasn't a phase. It was a choice, and Margaret had made it. I lit a candle on the coffee table, not for hope, but for warmth, and whispered a prayer. Not for her to change, but for me to survive. The next morning, Daniel's knock pulled me from a fog. I was still in pajamas, the emerald dress abandoned, my hair unbrushed. I opened the door, and there he stood, his wedding suit rumpled, his face drawn. "Eleanor," he said, "can we talk?" I led him to the dining room, the same oak table where Margaret and I had carved pumpkins and wrapped Christmas gifts. I poured coffee, more out of habit than hospitality, and we sat across from each other. He turned the mug in his hands, searching for words. "I read the letter you wrote Maggie," he began. "It was in the gift box, under her shoes in the car. She didn't open it. I did." My breath caught. The letter, written weeks earlier in a moment of hope, was meant for Margaret's wedding morning. I'd poured my heart into it, every word a testament to our bond. "Why are you here, Daniel?" I asked, my voice steady but curious. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "She's been different since the engagement. She said you were controlling, that you wanted the wedding your way, that you were too much." I believed her at first, but that letter, it wasn't written by someone trying to control anything. It was written by a mother who loved her daughter fiercely and was hurting. He paused, running a hand through his hair. "I asked her about you after the wedding. She shut down, said it was complicated. But it's not, is it? She pushed you out, and I didn't see it until I read your words." I leaned back, processing. "What did the letter say to you?" I asked. He swallowed. "It said you'd give your life for her, that every moment, every late-night cry, every birthday cake, was part of your soul. It said you weren't perfect, but your love never wavered. And it said you hoped she'd always find her way back to you, not because she had to, but because she wanted to." I nodded, a lump in my throat. "Thank you for reading it, but this isn't your burden to carry." "I know," he said. I needed to see you, to tell you that you're not invisible. Someone should have said it sooner." We sat in silence for a moment, the coffee steaming between us. I didn't ask him to fix things or to speak for Margaret, but his visit lit a small spark, not hope for her return, but a realization that my pain was real, and someone had seen it. As he left, he paused at the door. "If I'd known, I would have saved you a seat." I smiled, not bitterly, but with grace. I didn't need a seat at the wedding, Daniel. I just needed someone to see I existed. Daniel's visit marked a turning point, though not in the way I expected. I didn't wait for Margaret to call or for an apology to erase the hurt. Instead, I began rebuilding my life, not with grand gestures, but with quiet, deliberate steps. I was done being a ghost in my own story. I joined a book club at the Parma Library, where women my age gathered every Tuesday to discuss novels. Everything from To Kill a Mockingbird to The Nightingale. At first, I sat quietly, listening to their stories of lost loves, grown children, and new beginnings. But over time, I shared my own, bits of Margaret's childhood, my years at the diner, my love for painting that I'd abandoned when motherhood took over. The women listened, their nods and gentle questions reminding me I was more than a mother who'd been rejected. I was Eleanor, with stories worth telling. I picked up painting again, setting up an easel in the spare bedroom where Margaret used to do her homework. My first attempts were clumsy, blotchy landscapes and lopsided still lifes, but they brought a joy I'd forgotten. I painted the lake in winter, the church steeple against a snowy sky, the Christmas tree in my living room. Each stroke was a reclaiming of the woman I'd been before motherhood defined me. I also started volunteering at the community center, teaching kids to bake Christmas cookies using my mother's gingerbread recipe. The kitchen was chaos, flour-dusted countertops, kids giggling as they snuck bites of dough, but it was alive. One boy, Tommy, reminded me of Margaret at that age, with his shy smile and endless questions. "Why do we put molasses in the cookies, Miss Eleanor?" he'd ask, and I'd explain, feeling useful in a way I hadn't in years. I stopped checking Margaret's social media, stopped scrolling for glimpses of her wedding photos or hints of her life. I unfollowed her, not out of spite, but to free myself from chasing shadows. I filled my days with small acts of purpose, reading poetry by Mary Oliver, tending the poinsettias on my porch, writing letters to my sister Joan about the book club and the kids at the center. I wasn't erasing Margaret. I was making room for Eleanor. One evening, as I sat by the fire with a cup of chamomile tea, I pulled out an old journal from my nightstand. I'd kept it in my 20s, before Margaret, filled with short stories and sketches of dreams I'd once had, traveling to Paris, publishing a collection of essays, opening a small bookstore. I read through the pages, smiling at the boldness of my younger self. Maybe she was still in me, waiting to be rediscovered. I started writing again, not stories, but reflections on love, on loss, on the quiet strength of starting over at 67. 3 months after the wedding, in late February, a letter arrived. The envelope bore Margaret's familiar looping handwriting, and my heart thudded as I held it. I didn't open it right away. I made a pot of tea, sat by the Christmas tree, its lights now packed away, the room dimmer without them, and traced the edges of the envelope. Finally, I tore it open, unfolding a single page written in blue ink. "Dear Mom, I've rewritten this letter a dozen times, and I still don't know if it's enough. I hurt you, shutting you out of a day that should have been ours. I was scared, not of you, but of failing you. You've always been so strong, so present, the kind of mother people write books about. I felt like I could never measure up, like I'd disappoint you no matter what I did. I thought if I controlled everything, the wedding, the guest list, even you, I could keep myself from falling apart. But I was wrong. I created a void, and I'm living in it now. Daniel told me about the letter you wrote. I found the gift box in my car, still unopened, and when I read your words, I sobbed. I saw you, not just Mom, but Eleanor, who gave up so much to give me everything. I saw the nights you stayed up sewing my costumes, the mornings you braided my hair before school, the way you made every Christmas feel like magic. I'm sorry, Mom. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to try again. I want to know you, not just as my mother, but as the woman you are. If you'll let me. Love, Margaret. I read the letter 5 times, tears streaming down my cheeks. It wasn't just an apology. It was accountability, a recognition of the woman I'd been and the pain I'd endured. But I didn't call her. I folded the letter, placed it in my journal, and sat by the window, watching the snow fall. I needed time to feel, to decide what I wanted. Forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip. It was a path I'd have to walk, step by step. The following Christmas season, the community center hosted its annual charity concert, a tradition in Parma that drew families from across the county. The hall was decked in garlands and twinkling lights, with a towering tree in the corner adorned with handmade ornaments. I was at the cookie booth, arranging trays of gingerbread men and sugar cookies, my apron dusted with flour. The air smelled of cinnamon and pine, and a local choir sang, "O Holy Night," their voices filling the room with warmth. I was handing a cookie to a little girl when I glanced up and saw her, Margaret, standing in the corner by the hot cocoa station. She wore a red sweater and scarf, her brown eyes scanning the crowd. My heart skipped, but I kept working, unsure if she'd seen me. Then she started walking toward the booth, her steps hesitant but deliberate, like someone crossing a frozen lake. "Mom," she said when she reached me, her voice trembling. "Can I help?" I paused, meeting her eyes. They were softer than I remembered, unguarded, like the girl who used to beg for one more bedtime story. I nodded, handing her an apron. "We could use an extra pair of hands." We worked side by side, wrapping cookies in cellophane, tying them with red ribbons. Our conversation was tentative at first. Small talk about the snow, the choir's rendition of Silent Night, the kid who'd just spilled cocoa on his coat. But it was real, unguarded, the first time we'd been in the same space without a wall between us. As the crowd thinned and the choir began, "White Christmas?" Margaret set down a tray and turned to me. Her hands fidgeted, then reached for mine. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong. About the wedding, about pushing you away, about everything. I was scared of not being enough for you. So I thought if I kept you out, I wouldn't fail. But I failed anyway, and I lost you. I don't want to lose you anymore." The room seemed to fade, the music, the chatter, the clink of mugs. I looked at her, seeing not just the woman who'd hurt me, but the girl I'd raised, the daughter I'd loved through every storm. I squeezed her hands, my throat tight. "You haven't lost me, Margaret, but we have work to do, together." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I pulled her into a hug, not the tight embrace of our past, but a real one, tired and honest. The choir's voices swelled, the Christmas lights glowed, and I felt something shift, not a full repair, but a beginning. Margaret and I didn't become inseparable after that night. Healing wasn't a single moment. It was a process, fragile and deliberate. We started meeting every few weeks, for coffee at the corner cafe, for walks in the metro parks where kids sledded down snowy hills and couples skated on frozen ponds. She opened up about the pressures she'd faced: Evelyn's expectations for a perfect wedding, her own fears of not measuring up as a daughter, a wife, a lawyer. "I thought if I could control everything, I'd be okay," she said one afternoon, stirring her latte. "But I wasn't, and I hurt you because of it." I listened, not interrupting, not judging. I shared my own story, not just the pain, but the growth. I told her about the book club, where I'd found friends who saw me as Eleanor, not just Margaret's mom. I described my paintings, the joy of creating something new at 67. I talked about the kids at the community center, how their laughter reminded me of her at that age. And I admitted I'd learned to love myself, not just through motherhood, but as a woman with dreams of her own. I wore the necklace every day, its heart pendant resting against my collarbone. It wasn't a symbol of waiting for Margaret anymore. It was a badge of my resilience, a reminder that I'd survived the deepest hurt and found my way back to myself. I didn't offer it to her, and she didn't ask. That was okay. Some things needed time. One snowy evening in January, Margaret showed up at my house unannounced, a cardboard box in her arms. "I found this in my attic," she said, setting it on the dining table. Inside was an old photo album, its leather cover worn from years of handling. We sat by the fireplace, the crackle of logs filling the silence, and flipped through the pages. There was Margaret in her ballet tights, pirouetting at age 8. Us singing karaoke on Christmas Eve, microphones in hand, laughing so hard we could barely breathe. A photo of us under the tree, arms around each other, Margaret's face smudged with cookie icing. She pointed to that one, her voice soft. "I miss this, Mom. Not just the moment, but how safe I felt with you. I want that back." I reached for her hand. "We'll get there, sweetheart. One memory at a time." We spent the evening sipping hot cocoa, adding new photos to the album, recent ones, like us at the concert, wrapping cookies together. We didn't talk about the wedding or the months of silence. We didn't need to. The act of remembering, of building something new, was enough. My house is no longer a place of waiting. It's a home, alive with the hum of my life. Mine, not just the mother I was to Margaret. The Christmas tree is up again, its lights brighter this year, and the poinsettias on the porch bloom red against the snow. The necklace rests against my chest, its heart pendant catching the glow of the season. Maybe one day I'll pass it to Margaret when the time feels right. For now, it's mine, a symbol of love that endured, of pain that shaped me, of Eleanor, who found herself amid the wreckage. As I once told Margaret when she cried over a snow castle melting by Lake Erie, "Even if it melts, you'll always know how to build again." I've rebuilt not the same structure, but something stronger, wiser, more my own. And in the soft glow of this Christmas season, I know I didn't just find my daughter. I found myself a woman who loved deeply, lost profoundly, and chose to live fully, not just for others, but for the life still burning within her. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and please share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear where you're watching from and what this story meant to you. Your voice matters, and I can't wait to connect with you all.